Right, so thank you, ladies and gentlemen. By this time you really ought to know where we are. We're actually in Westminster Underground Station, and what I'm doing is coming up to the gates with a view to making my way towards Parliament Square. So let's just see how we go. Touch out. There we go. Very crowded today. It's Saturday, 26th of July. And as I've done before, I make my way up this flight of stairs to stand outside the Houses of Parliament. So even though it's July, the weather is a bit overcast. It's not actually raining. Or am I wrong? I think it is raining. Let's go and find out. If it is, then I'm going to abort this entire mission and I will have to start again another day. So let's just see. No, I think actually we've got, the weather is reasonable. So Parliament is directly ahead of us, and as I've said before, this is the clock tower which holds the bell called Big Ben. And what I want to do now is make my way into Parliament Square, just to talk basically, briefly, about the context of the buildings in this particular area, why they're historically important. So make my way through the crowds. Down to the crossing point, which is just a little way ahead of us. It's a Saturday, so it looks as if there's a demonstration in the square. I'm not quite certain what they're demonstrating about. It could be anything. I shall do what I can to avoid getting involved in that. I can hear the sound of bagpipes, which indicates there's a Scotsman somewhere in the close vicinity. Now what you can see are the Houses of Parliament, and you can also see Westminster Abbey. And Parliament Square is over on my right-hand side. We're just waiting for the green signal, and once we get the green signal, then I will cross over. Remarking on the amount of traffic. Oh, look, now we can cross over. Well, we could. We've got the green light, but the traffic hasn't stopped. Right, well, they shouldn't be doing that. They should allow us to cross over. Okay, we've got 9 seconds, 8 seconds. Let's see how we manage. Actually, we've got a lot of people. Can't see them knocking us all down somehow. You never know. Right, and as we did in the last video, we now have to cross over again to get into the square. So the square was laid out, now I'll have to go back and check this, but I think it was 1859. Might be wrong, but it was laid out by Sir Charles Barry, who designed Well, he designed several buildings. I'll point these out to you. If we go forward and we can approach the statue of Churchill. We've seen this before. And so that's Churchill. And there's this demonstration going on. There's another demonstration here. And we're right in the heart of Parliament Square. So we're right in the heart of London, of course. And well, that's what this series of videos is called. And difficult to think of it as a city with 9.5 million people. Going back in time a bit, it's worth saying that people arrived on these islands, human beings of one subspecies or another, were here around about 800,000 BC. The River Thames, which is immediately beyond the Houses of Parliament here. The House of Parliament is located on the banks of the River Thames. The River Thames has followed this course for, they reckon, 450,000 years. It was pushed there by the water flowing off from the ice ages all those years ago. So people have lived on the banks of the River Thames for an awfully long time. But if you come back here, the time of the Roman invasion, that would have been, what, 43 AD, when the Emperor Claudius arranged to conquer these islands and sent 4 legions under the command of Aulus Plautus. When they came here up the Thames, they found that there was a natural ford over the river at this point, where at low tide the water was shallow enough to wade through. And it had been that way for hundreds, if not thousands of years. So this was the lowest point along the River Thames where you could cross at low tide by wading across the water. But I say it was very marshy ground here, and when the Romans first arrived, they considered the possibility of founding a new settlement here, but they chose not to do so. What they did is move further downriver, about not quite a couple of miles, over towards the north and the east. That's to say, in that direction, just beyond that building with they're not chimneys, they're a curious sort of air conditioning system known as Portcullis House. So this would have been empty marshland, and you had the Isle of Thorns. Actually, there was a river that came down here called the River Tyburn, which branched into 2 before flowing into the Thames, and there was this piece of relatively solid ground called the Isle of Thorns, and you had communities here of fishermen, for many, many years, and they were here throughout the Roman period and even after the Romans left. And so the first major development here was the creation of Westminster Abbey, which I can point out here. And I think it's going to be sensible to take this all in chronological order. So this is Westminster Abbey, and then King Edward the Confessor moved out of the city of London to build a palace on the banks of the River Thames way back in 1049. And that was the original Palace of Westminster, which later became the Houses of Parliament. I'm going to do a separate video on the Houses of Parliament, and I do a separate video on Westminster Abbey. But for the time being, I just want to walk around here and just to make cultural context. Otherwise, it's all going to be a bit of a jumble. So what I'm doing is I'm now trying to make my way over the square. I've talked about these statues here. I've talked about Churchill, David Lloyd George, Prime Minister of Britain, Jan Smuts, who was Prime Minister of South Africa and a great supporter of Britain during the First and Second World Wars. And the next statue along is Viscount Palmerston. Palmerston is what they call an Irish peerage. If you're a British peer, a English or Welsh or Scots peer, you sit in the House of Lords. But if you're an Irish peer, you are entitled to sit in the House of Commons. Don't ask me why, seems to be a very strange rule, but anyway, that's what it is. Now what I'm looking to do here, I think the easiest thing is to cross over and get to the other side of the street. When the lights change, of course, not until. Now this building is the old Treasury building, and it was designed by Sir Charles Barry. And Sir Charles Barry was the same man who designed the House of Parliament. Wouldn't think so, but he at least sketched the general outline, the plan of the House of Parliament, and it was another architect, a man called Augustus Pugin, who added all the decorative detail of the Victorian Gothic. And not only did he add the decorative detail to the outside, but he also was responsible for the interior design of the building, all the way down to the desks and the inkwells. So that was Augustus Pugin, and that was when the Gothic style became, right, we can cross, when the Gothic style really took off, and that would have been in the 1850s. Right, so what we'll do now is cross over and we'll cross over again if there are no cars coming. There are no cars coming, so I will cross over. It's a bit naughty to go against the lights, but there we are, there's nothing coming. And here, I should have done in the last video, I should have saved this. This is the statue of George Canning, who was the Foreign Secretary of Britain in the 1820s after the victory at Waterloo. And because he was Foreign Secretary, he was very instrumental in securing British foreign policy throughout Europe. And he became Prime Minister in 1829, and he was only Prime Minister for about 6 months before he died, which is rather sad. But they set up a statue, so this is George Canning. We'll move forward, heading off now in the general direction of Westminster Abbey. And again, as we walk down here, another statue which I spoke about a little bit earlier, but we can get a much better view of it now. And this is the statue of the American President Abraham Lincoln. It's a copy of a statue in Lincoln Park, Chicago. They made several copies and they were shipped to different parts of the United States and around the world. And the Americans gave this statue to us in 1920. There he is. Good. Right. Now the building behind the statue is called the Middlesex Guildhall, which was not particularly ancient. It's dates from 1912, 1913, and it's now the home of our Supreme Court. The Supreme Court was a creation under the constitutional reforms of Tony Blair to be the place where they settle ultimate questions about law. Prior to this, there used to be the legal committee, the judicial committee of the House of Lords, but that was all abolished, and they created this special court and put it here, and they deliberate about questions of law. Very recently they came up with the definition that a woman is an adult male female. They spent a lot of time coming to that conclusion, but eventually they did. So it just shows you that common sense can prevail. Now what's interesting here is that you can see just above the doorway, you've got some sculptures which I need to talk about. The sculpture over the doorway is the sculpture of King Henry III giving a charter to the monks of Westminster Abbey. So that's on just immediately above the doorway. Here, over on the right-hand side, is a statue of Lady Jane Grey being offered the crown to become Queen. She's not usually counted as one of our members of our royalty. She was a cousin of King Edward VI, who died as I think he was about 16 years old or something, and the question then is who should reign, and the point was that the next person in line was Queen Mary, his half-sister, who was Catholic, and there was a large body of opinion that was against that move. So the only person they could find would have been Lady Jane Grey, who at that time was betrothed to Guildford Dudley. So that was the Dudleys who were looking to become the kings of England, establish their family over the Tudors. Queen Jane, as she was only queen for 9 days before Queen Mary actually got her forces together and came to invade London, and Lady Jane Grey, Queen Jane, was confined to the Tower of London, and some years afterwards she was beheaded. But there we are. That was for opposing Queen Mary. She just got caught up in politics. She didn't really want to be queen. It's rather sad. Don't suppose even Guildford Dudley really wanted to be king, but it was the parents, the fathers, actually tried to sort this out. Here, what we have is an interesting depiction of King John, who is the father of Henry III, giving his assent to the document known as the Magna Carta in 1215. This happened at the Isle of Runnymede, which is further up the River Thames. So that's an important point in constitutional law. The effect of this was to say that the king, just like everyone else, should obey the ordinary law of the land. And this is cited throughout English-speaking countries throughout the world. Okay, right, now we'll move on. As I say, you can get a much better view of the north front of the Abbey here. I won't go there just at the moment. What I want to do is just take us round and give you some idea of where the Abbey is located in relation to other buildings. So if we head round here, we're coming down a street called Broad Sanctuary. There we have it, Broad Sanctuary. The sanctuary was a place where people fleeing from justice used to take refuge in the sanctuary attached to Westminster Abbey, and that meant that the law couldn't touch them. That was the thinking. And the result of that, of course, was that the sanctuary just filled up with lots and lots of criminals. But anyway, that's another matter. Broad Sanctuary takes us round to a place called the Little Sanctuary. This street around here. Of course, all these buildings disappeared hundreds of years ago. But anyway, that's Little Sanctuary. And we head forward now to make our way up towards the front, or at least where you can, not so much the front of the Abbey, but where you get a good view of the front of Westminster Abbey. Over on my right-hand side, we have the Queen Elizabeth Centre. This is a conference centre built in 1986, so it's not particularly old, and it can accommodate 1,300 delegates. So we've got all the modern facilities for a conference centre in this building. And in front of us, this building here, this is Methodist Central Hall. Methodist Central Hall was built in 1911. Get a good look at it. Extraordinary elaborate Baroque architecture is quite out of keeping with Methodist principles I would have thought, but who am I to comment on that? Why this hall is historically significant is that it was the meeting place for the first meeting of the General Assembly of the United Nations in 1946. And while we're here, it's worth pointing out to you that you go through the front door there and then go downstairs to the right, you will find a little cafe, a canteen. I won't call it a restaurant, it's a place where they serve, what do they serve? They serve good meals, actually, not expensive. It's all very Methodist. It's very plain food, very straightforward, not expensive, but it's the sort of place that you really need to know about if you are sightseeing in central London, because you can spend an enormous amount of money in London for no good effect if you don't know what you're doing. But I'm happy to recommend that as a place to go and have lunch. Now, okay, well, what we'll do is we'll swing round, and what we will do is see the front of the Abbey. And here we are. Just go over the green. So this is Westminster Abbey, and there's so much to talk about Westminster Abbey that I think I'll need another video in which to do that. So what I propose to do is to sign off here. I shan't say cheerio, my dearios, because if I keep doing that it'll just become a bad habit. It's an annoying thing. So I'll just say thank you, ladies and gentlemen, if you have been watching. And I will see you in the next video. This is Westminster Abbey, and I will talk about Westminster Abbey in the next video.